thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. How are you? I hope you are okay. So today we are starting from Unit 2, right, on project management. So that's where we are starting. Okay, right. Okay, so today's lecture is on Unit 2, and it's going to cover constraints and potential project resources and problems in project environment, right? So just a recap of what we did in the first lecture, where we covered the introductory on concept on project management, right? So in our previous lecture, we talked about project scope, right? And we also talked about the components of a project and components of management and project scope as well, right? And we just a recap, and we also said we mentioned the components of a project, and where we said that the components of a project, a project is comprised of there's time, there's cost, resources, and technology. So those four are the components of a project, right? And then we also mentioned components of management, where we said components of management, organizing, planning, controlling, and coordinating, right? And we also defined project scope, where we said that project scope is basically, we are basically looking at the deliverables of a project, or rather we can say end result of a project, or the end output of a project, or the result that we expect to see at the end of a project, right? And also in our previous lecture, we also looked at a question which was on constraints of a project, right? And we also mentioned that the project constraints, we are basically looking at some components of, we are basically looking at components of a project, which is time, cost, right? And also another constraint of a project is project scope, right? And also, yeah, so we discussed about that. And also, we discussed on how to answer that question. And oh, someone is asking in the chat box, our assignment is right here. What exactly are you trying to say, Reb? You can just type in the chat box so that again, I can see what you're trying to say. Okay, so that was—
Sorry, I was saying our assignment is here on the constraints, the scope, the time, and all of that. That's our assignment.
Oh, okay. That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so so basically your assignment is basically the same, like that question that we looked at, right?
Sorry, I wasn't here last week. I'm still waiting to hear the recording. But
Okay,
yeah, this is the assignment.
Okay, no problem. So here's what we're gonna do today. we're going to cover this this topic or this unit 2, and then at the end of the unit 2, we are going to discuss on possible questions that the examiner can actually extract from this unit or from this chapter. And we are going to conclude our lecture by discussing also that assignment, right? Since it's on constraints, we are also going to look at that assignment. We'll actually rediscuss it, how we answer it in the context of that case study given, right? Is it okay? Are you happy?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, that's perfect. So let's start with today's business. So we are looking at so what we covered in the first, basically what we covered, you see that what we covered in the first lecture, we are going to do it in detail, like as we progress with the lectures, you are going to see that some of the concepts that we introduced in the first lecture, we are going to cover them in detail in units we are going to cover later on, right? Like for instance, in the first lecture we covered, we discussed about constraints, right? But as you can see that it's now a whole chapter on constraints, right? So yeah, that's the good thing about this module, right? So we're going to cover constraints and potential project resources and problems in a project environment, right? So so basically, project constraints, right? Project constraints, we say that project constraints, these are factors which limit success of a project, right? So whenever you're asked to define a project constraint, we say that a project constraint, you define it by saying, these are factors which limits the success of a project, right? And these constraints, right, includes cost, scope, and time, right? So we are still going to use our example, the example that we used in the first unit, the example of building a house. So we are going to use that example so that every point that we emphasize on is clear and everyone understands like everything that we are actually going to explain, right? So cost is actually one of the project constraint, or it's one of the limiting factor of a project, right? So we are saying cost is a constraint in the sense that cost, we are basically looking at the amount of money that we set aside to use in the project, right? So like, for example, if we are saying, if we want to build a house as our project, right? For us to build a house, we need money to buy resources, right? And resources, we are basically looking at the bricks to build the house, cement, concrete, roofing materials, you see. So for us to buy, like to have such kind of resources, we need money. We need money. We have to budget money to buy or to purchase those resources, right? And also other resources like the labor. Or in this case, if we are looking at building a house, we are basically looking at the builders, right? Those builders, they need their salaries, right? So the budget that we set aside for that project, that's where we take money to pay those builders, right? So money is very, very important. It sustains, because it sustains like the project, right? For you can't carry out a project without money, right? You need money to buy materials, you need money to pay the builders, you need money to pay even the project manager, the one who manages the project, right? So the cost is actually a constraint, in the sense that if, like, imagine if we use, let's say we've budgeted 50,000 rands towards a project, or towards a project of building a house. And if the project happens to, let's say, to attract 60,000, right? It means on our budgeted amount, we've now exceeded the budgeted amount, right? So it means we now need more money than anticipated, right? So it becomes a constraint to the project, right? And also, imagine if we buy material. Let's say we are building a house as our project, and we buy materials, right? And after purchasing materials, and let's say we later realize that it's like the materials that we purchased, some of the materials they are substandard, or some of the materials they are stolen. So it means we now need more materials so that we finish the project, right? But as we need more materials, it means we are going to strain our budget as well, right? So that becomes a constraint. Otherwise, if we experience, let's say, theft of materials, it means the project is going to take more time than anticipated. Hence, it becomes a constraint, right? So that's on cost. So I'm gonna ask if I'm gonna leave like this room to everyone, so that they may ask if there's any question that they may think they have on cost as a constraint, so that as we move to another constraint or another factor, we actually move together. Any questions on cost? Any question? It's clear, right? Okay, that's fine. So we move to scope as a project constraint, right? Scope, we are basically looking at project scope. So project scope, we say that project scope, these are the deliverables that we expect to see at the end of a project, right? So those deliverables, or the end result that we expect to see at the end of the project, those end results or those deliverables determine the success of a project, right? So project scope becomes a constraint, in the sense that imagine that we want to build a 5-bedroom apartment or a 5-bedroom house, right? And we know that a 5-bedroom apartment, or every apartment should have a toilet, right? And also that apartment should have a kitchen, and so forth and so forth, right? But if it happens that at the end of the project, we build a house without a toilet, it means that that house becomes, or that project becomes a failure, right? Because we fail to meet the project scope, or the expected deliverables that we expect to see at the end of a project, right? So you find out that even if we use let's say substandard materials, it means if we use substandard materials at the end of the project, we will not deliver quality deliverables or quality project deliverables. If we are building a house, it means if we use substandard materials to build a house, at the end of the project, we'll definitely have a substandard house, right? So it becomes a constraint, right? So it means all the resources that we are going to use towards the project should be managed very well so that we meet or we deliver the expected end results of a project, right? So that's basically on scope, right? So the next constraint or the next limiting factor is time, right? And on time, we say that every project should have a start date and end date, right? So I can just demonstrate just a little bit. I can just demonstrate. Let me try to share my whiteboard. Let me share my whiteboard. So as I wait for my whiteboard to open, just continue to explain. Okay. Okay. Right. So let me share. Okay, so I'll explain, I'll actually illustrate so that everyone understands like each and every constraint, how it affects like progress of a project, right? So let's say, for example, we have our project, and our project, let's say we want to build a house, right? Build a house. Right. Let's say we want to build a house. That's our project, right? So our project, every project should have a start date, right? Let's say, for example, we are starting at date X, right? And we should finish at date Y, right? Or rather, we can say we want to start, let's say first month, or we can say first month, right? And we anticipate to finish the project probably in the third month, right? Third month. So every project should have a start time, a start date. So this is our start date, right? Start date. And this is our finishing date, or our finishing date, right? So we finish on the third month, right? We finish here, right? So I want to illustrate how time becomes a constraint and how time affects the progress of a project, right? So imagine that since we have established our project, so it means we have to carry out the project within this period, right? But just think about it. Let's say if we buy, let's say substandard materials, or if part of our materials are stolen, right? It means we are going to need more materials, right? Or rather, if we are saying we are building a house and it's probably the raining season, right? And let's say we experience thunders, right? It means instead of finishing the project on the third month, we will now finish the project at the fourth month, right? But as we extend the tenure of the project, it means more resources are going to be needed, right? more resources in terms of the builders. Still, they are going to need their salaries, right? We have budgeted initially that we have to pay the builders within this period, right? But if we extend to the 4th month, it means those builders, they're still going to need salaries, right? Up to the 4th month, right? So it becomes a constraint to the project in the sense that if we have set 50,000 rand as budget towards our project, it means if we extend to the 4th month, we'll now need more money than 50,000. Probably we may need an extra 10,000 or an extra 20,000 to arrive at 70,000, right? So basically we can see that it affects the project or the progress of the project, right? In terms of the money that is going to be needed for the whole project, right? So that's on time. So any question or anyone who needs, we've got a question on time as a constraint, how it affects the project, progress of the project, and so forth. Anyone?
Hello.
Yes.
It's not a question necessarily. Can Tokozile mute, please?
Okay. 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 Thank you so much. Thank you so much about that. Okay. So that's on time. So I'm going to reiterate again on costs as a constraint, cost, right? And also project scope. I'm going to, to just illustrate so that we understand better. People we understand better through illustrations, right? So I'll start with cost, right? We've looked at, we've illustrated time, how time affects progress of the project, and also how time is considered as a constraint, right? So now we are looking at cost. We're just going to illustrate how cost affects the project, right? Let's say, for example, we are saying our project is building a house, right? Building a house, that's our project, right? Right, building a house. So if you want to build a house, let's say initially, right, we budget, let's say 50,000 rand, right, towards our project. So this is our budget, right? This is our budget. So in other words, that's the cost. In other words, you can say that's the cost of the project, right? So that's the amount of money that we set aside for that specific project of building a house, right? Right. So it's actually an estimated amount of money that we can think this amount of money, probably that is the amount of money that we are going to need for us to start the project up until the end of the project, right? So if let's say something happens along doing like the project, right? Let's say building a house, let's say we experience heavy rains, right? And then heavy rains, let's say they like the roofing, like the roof of the house is destroyed due to heavy rains, right? It means we are going to need an extra amount. Let's say we experience heavy rains, right? It means due to heavy rains, they destroy, let's say they destroy the roof, right? In destroying the roof, it means we are going to need more money to actually redo the roofing, right? So as we need more money to redo the roof, it means our cost here of 50,000 is going to increase, right? And after increase, probably that roofing will probably will cost an extra $30,000. So it becomes 80,000, right? But imagine if 80,000 is not available. It means the project manager have to wait up until they get more money or up until they get money, to redo the G. So it means the project will now take more time than expected or than anticipated. So imagine if it's a client, we are actually building the house. It means that client.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
It's quite disturbing that we've got our colleagues here who unmute, and it is distracting.
Yes.
And can we make sure that we all mute?
Okay. Can we all mute our mics? Okay, I think everyone is muted. Everyone is muted. Okay. Can we all please make sure that we mute our mics so that we don't disturb others, right? Okay, so I was saying, imagine we are building a house as our project, and we experience heavy rains, and due to heavy rains, they destroy the roof of the house. So it means the roof, we have to redo the roof of the house. So it means if we have initially budgeted 50,000, someone with iPhone. Okay. It means if we have initially budgeted for 50,000 towards the project, and the cost of redoing the, let's say, the roof probably cost another extra 30,000 or extra 25,000, 20,000. It means in total we may need probably 70,000 plus rands to is part of total cost of the project, right? But imagine if that amount is not available, right?
Yeah.
Okay. May we please make sure we mute our mics, please? Okay. So it means we may need more money, but imagine if that extra amount needed to redo the roofing is not available. It means the project manager or the project or the organization carrying out the project should actually wait until they get more money, right? But if we are doing, or if we are building a house, let's say for someone or for a client, right? It means the client will get bored and bored and bored up until the client considers that project is an unsuccessful project. Why? Because the organization or actually the organization doing the project may have failed to deliver the project in time, in anticipated time, or in planned time, right? So that's how costs actually affect the progress of a project, right? And also imagine if, let's say, for example, if we've budgeted 50,000 as the budget towards the project, and let's say in doing the project, and we realize later that, let's say we charge the client 50,000, and later we realize that the client, let's say, should have given us probably 80,000 due to, let's say, the cost of the materials. It becomes also a problem. Why? Because let's say the client may say, I don't have that amount of money as of now. It means the project will stop up until the client pays that extra amount. So, it becomes a problem, you see. So it delays the project. The date in which the project is supposed to be finished will be delayed, and it becomes a failure to the project, right? So that's it on how cost affects the progress of a project, right? And so the last constraint is scope. Probably we can say project scope, right? Project scope, right? So on project scope, we are basically looking at the factors, right? Which limits success of the project. Oh, sorry. Project scope, we are basically looking at deliverables. Sorry. We are basically looking at deliverables of the project, right? We are basically looking at deliverables of the project, right? Of the project, right? So deliverables or building deliverables of the project. Let's say our project is building a house. It means the deliverables that we expect to see, or the end result that we expect to see at the end of the project. If it's building a house, we expect to see a quality house. We expect to see a house with a toilet. We expect to see a house with a kitchen. Those are deliverables of a project, right? Those are the end result that we expect to see at the end of a project, right? So imagine that we use substandard materials, right? Let's say the materials, we use substandard bricks, we use substandard cement, we use substandard roofing, right? What is going to happen? It means that at the end of the project, probably we start to see, if it's plumbing, we start to see, let's say, water leaking, right? It means the quality of the project is not of good quality. And in doing so, if we say, let's say we have finished the project, but we later realize that the pipes are actually leaking, right? It means we also need more resources, or we also need more money, to do the repairs, right? But imagine if by the time we need to do the repairs, we don't have the money. So it basically means that we are going to wait until we get the money so that we finish that project, right? So it delays the project, right? And the project, the deliverables that we expect, it means that the deliverables that we expect are of poor quality. So imagine if you are the client and I have delivered something or a house, I have built a house for you, a house you later realize that it's actually leaking, all right? You actually consider that project as a failure, right? So project, now the scope of the project becomes a constraint to the project, right? Because we now need to redo the project, more costs are going to be, more money is going to be needed to do the repairs. And it means also that we will extend the time, we need more time as well, to do the repairs. So that project becomes an unsuccessful project, right? So that's it on project scope, right? So there is what we call, you should know this by head. You should make sure that you know this even whenever you're going to the exam, or you're doing anything, like any question on project constraint, or whenever you see any question on project constraint, the first thing that should come in your mind is called a triangle of constraint, right? Or we can call it a constraint triangle, right? It's just a simple triangle, triangle. So a constraint triangle, we are just basically saying this is our triangle, right? So in these vertices, we can have scope here, we have scope, we have cost here, right? And we have time here, right? And here, the center, we write quality, right? Quality in the sense that at the end of the project, we expect to see a quality project, right? But these are the factors which can limit the progress of the project, which is scope, time, and cost, right? So you have to have this in your mind whenever you are asked any question on projects, constraints of a project. Just think of this triangle, constraint triangle. Constraint triangle, you have scope, cost, time, and quality at the center. What it basically means, it means that the cost, this is the constraint in the sense that if the project requires more money than expected, it becomes a challenge. Why? Because it may take more time than anticipated to complete the project, right? And time, if we don't manage our resources properly, or if, let's say, we order substandard resources or substandard materials, which are supposed to be used to do the project, it means that we are going to need more money or more time to finish the project, right? And scope as well, if we don't manage the cost and time properly, it means the scope or the deliverables, right, will take more time and more cost to have these deliverables, right? And these deliverables, we have to make sure that they are of good quality, right? So as we actually make sure this at the end, or as we make sure we have this at the end, or if we manage very well, if we effectively manage these constraints, it means this project becomes a success, right? Success, right? So that's it on project constraints. So just make sure that you picture this in your mind. Whenever you see anything, any question, any case study on project constraint, I'll actually show you like as we will do like the assignment, your assignment question, we actually going to touch this as well. You know, I'll actually show you how you do it when you're answering any project, any question on constraints of a project, right? So that's it on constraint, project constraint. Anyone with any question or anyone with any addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, or anyone? Okay, I suppose
Hello, sir.
It was clear. Yes?
Quick one.
Yes.
Can I simply say that any constraint on any one of the three will affect the other two?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So let me explain again on that. You see that, let's say, for example, if we look at cost, right? Let's say if we under budget, or let's say if we budget 50,000 instead of 80,000, right? And we later realize that the project actually needs 80,000 instead of 50,000. And by that time, let's say we don't have any money, right? It means the project will stop up until we get the money. In stopping, it means the project time or the finishing time will actually stretch to up until we finish. So it means if we've initially planned to finish the project within 3 months, it basically means that we need, let's say, an extra month to finish the project because of the costs, right? So you see how these factors link, right? Even on time, right? On time, if, let's say, for example, we are carrying out a project, let's say building a house, and let's say we experience heavy rains, and probably heavy rains, they destroy the roof, right? It means that house or that roof will need to redo it, right? In redoing that house, right? It means that the time of finishing will stretch. At the same time, we are going to need more resources to redo the house. So it means the cost as well, the cost burden will actually increase, right? So, and looking at scope, we are looking at the deliverables, right? The end results that we expect to see at the end of the project, right? So if, for example, we don't manage our time very well, right? It means that we are going to have those deliverables, right? We are going to have those deliverables probably, let's say if we have planned to finish that project within 3 months, and let's say we face some delays, and we delay, let's say, for an extra month, it means we are going to have those deliverables, let's say, on the 4th month. But remember, in most cases, these projects, companies will actually be doing this project for their clients, right? So imagine yourself as the client, right? If you have initially planned, or if you have initially arranged with the company that I want to see my house complete, let's say in 3 months, and the company later told you that, you know what, we can't finish the house in 3 months. We are now going to finish the house in 5 months or in 6 months, right? It becomes a problem to you, right? So it becomes a constraint, right? So you see, the deliverables, they are being delivered at the wrong time, right? And even the cost, if we use the money to buy substandard materials, right? It means, or along doing the project, if we don't manage our resources very well, right? Like, for example, buying substandard materials, it means the scope or the deliverables of the project will be of low quality. And being of low quality, it means even the client will not be happy with the deliverables of the project. So it becomes a constraint to the project, right? So these factors, they actually link, right? It's not clear, right? Okay. So, okay, we have actually covered that on project scope, right? So now we are moving to project management tools, right? So basically on project management tools, let me share my screen again. Right. So, right, project management tools, right? So we have identified the constraints of a project, right? We are going to use our constraint triangle, where we said we have cost and we have scope here, right? We have time here, right? And we have quality here, quality at the center, right? So we say that for us to have or for us to deliver, or for us to say this project is a successful project, we have to manage these, right? We have to manage these, right? And in managing, we have actually, like in our first lecture, we have identified the components of management, right? Where we said components of management, we have organizing, right? We have control, right? We have planning, and also we have coordinating, right? Right? So what it means is, for us to have a successful project, for us to say this is a project, is a success project, right? It means we have to manage these. We have to manage this. And in managing this, we are basically looking at the components of management, right? So it basically means that we have to manage. The first component is organize, right? We have to organize cost, we have to organize scope, we have to organize time, right? In managing this, we have to control. We have to control our time, we have to control our cost, we have to control our scope, right? Another component, it's planning, right? We have to plan our costs, we have to plan our time, we have to plan our scope, right? And the last component is coordinating, right? So it basically means that we have to coordinate the costs, the time, and the scope, right? But now if we are looking at the project management tools, right? These are now tools that we use, right, to organize, to control, to plan, and coordinate cost, time, and scope. I don't know if you get that, right? So we are saying that, so let me rub off this, right? Right. So we are saying, if you are now looking at, if you are now looking at projects, project management tools, right? We are now saying these are tools, right? These tools, they are tools that we use to organize, to control, to plan, and to coordinate, right? These constraints. Because as we organize these constraints, it means our project will become a success. As we control the cost, the scope, and time, basically our project will be a successful project. As we coordinate these constraints, it means our project will become a success. And as we plan these components, or like these constraints, it means we basically have a successful project, right? So in doing so, like for example, I can give an example. When you are saying planning, right? If you are saying planning, let's say planning time, right? We have to set time, like start date and end date, right? By doing so, we are planning the time that we should actually do or carry out the project. That's planning, right? And on organizing, if we are saying, like, in doing the project is for activities, right? But in allocating each activity time, so the up until the finishing is now organizing time, right? And on controlling, we're now saying, how best can we say how best can we monitor each activity so that we achieve it to the planned time or organized time, right? How best can you do it? It's now controlling, right? So you come up with measures to say if we want to, let's say, to lay out a foundation, if we have planned to say we need to finish that activity within a week, right? So on controlling, we have to do the best as we can so that we control the resources that we have so that we finish that activity within the set time, right? So that's controlling. And coordinating time, we now see, let's say coordinating time is now like the allocation of allocating like the time on to each activity as we progress with our project, right? So that's an example like of like how these project management tools work, right? So going back to what we want to say, want to look at project management tools, right? So project management tools, right? So I've started by explaining how these management tools work, right? In relation to the constraints, right? I said these tools, we use them to organize, to manage, to organize, to plan, to control, and to coordinate the constraint which the resource, like the cost, the scope, and time, so that at the end of the project, we have a successful project. Right. So project management tools. Right. Project management tools. Right. So the first one, we're going to start with what we call work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure. Right. Work breakdown structure. Basically, some they can call it WBS, right? Like this. So basically on work breakdown structure, we are saying we actually break down each and every activity that we should do, or each activities that should be done so in doing the project, right? Like for example, if we are saying we are building a house, so I'll just write here WBS, so that we are basically looking at WBS, work breakdown structure. If we are saying if we are building a house, right? So in building a house, we have to, before we start building a house, we have to create a work breakdown structure. That work breakdown structure, it's actually one of management tools, in the sense that the moment we list or the moment we break down activities to be conducted within the project, it means that each and every one or each stakeholder, be it project manager, project team, and other stakeholders, right, will know what to do at the right time, right? Like, for example, if we are building a house, we are saying we start with foundation. It's an example, foundation, right? That's another activity, right? And in doing so, in doing the foundation, what else are we going to do? Like on foundation, we're going to need, let's say, let's say, casting cement, laying bricks, you know. those are other, activities in doing like laying out the foundation, and so forth and so forth, right? So it's a breakdown. It's a breakdown that we're actually doing, like, so foundation, and later we also move to, let's say, window level. Window level, laying of bricks, people to mix the cement and the cement. What else? Other, like, laying out other building materials. So that's another activity, right, within that project, right? So we've break down the activity, right? And we go on to roofing. Roofing, we break down all the activities which may be undertaken, like in doing roofing, right? Up until we finish the project, right? So that's breakdown. That's what we call work breakdown structure. It's basically a breakdown of all the activities that we've done. So that's actually one of project management tools, in the sense that it helps to monitor one performance of or progress of the project. You can easily see that from this stage, we are going to move to this stage. From this stage, we're going to move to this stage, right? So that's basically work breakdown structure, right? Right. So the next one, I've actually listed them here. So the next one, we have statement of work, project network diagram, and critical path analysis. So we're going to explain each and every one, each of the, right? So the next one is statement of work, right? And this one we've actually explained in our previous lecture. What's statement of work? What is it like? So statement of work, statement of work, right? Statement of work is basically the same with the work breakdown structure, right? They're basically the same, because statement of work, it's a document, right? It's basically a document where we write, like, or we list, like, all the activities of the project, right? Of the project. So that's statement of work. Basically, it's a document that we list everything that we are going to do, everything, even the resources, the time. Yeah, on statement of work, we don't list like the time, but we just list all the activity. So the difference now between statement of work and work breakdown structure is that on work breakdown structure, we actually list, or we actually break down each activity, and we actually allocate the time that should be spent on that activity, right? But on statement of work, we basically list the activities. You get it, right? So that's basically on statement of work, right? And the third one, we are going to look at the project network diagram, right? So on project network diagram, project network diagram is basically listing the activities, but now on project network diagram, say project network diagram, right? So on project network diagram, basically we list the project in their ascending orders, and we assign we assign, let's say, for example, building a house, like building a house, right? Building a house. If you are building a house, let's say, for example, we can say A, B, C, up to, like, we can represent them with letters, right? And say, let's say, for example, A, let's say A denoting like first one, B, second one, C, third one, like, and the list continues and continues, right? Let's say, for example, the first one, we are saying foundation, right? Foundation, and on here we can say, let's say, for example, we can say, let's say, window level, roofing, right? And other activities that can actually be found on, like, when doing the project of building a house, right? And we actually assign, like, time. Let's say we can say foundation may take 7 days, doing or laying bricks up to window level. We can say, probably we can say, probably we can say another 7 days, 8 days, and so forth, right? And then after we create table like this, right, we now need to draw a network diagram, right? A network diagram is like this.
Hello. Sorry,
yes.
may I disturb?
Yes.
I'm a bit confused.
Yes.
The project management tools, which ones are they? Is it planning, organizing, control, and coordinating, or is the ones that you are presenting now? Which ones are project management tools?
All right. That's a good question. The ones that I'm actually presenting right now, these are the tools of managing a project, right? But planning, organizing, controlling, and coordinating, those are components of management. They are not tools, but they're just components. Like, when we are saying managing, it basically means we are looking at those components. I don't know if it's now clear. If it's not, we can actually explain again until it's clear. Is it now clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's perfect. So, project network diagram. So on project network diagram, you'll be given, like, for example, that table, and project network diagram, it now connects, like, for example, we can say here, we have, let's say, for example, here, we have, let's say, start. This is our start. This is our start, right? And in starting, let's say in starting, we can say, let's say, for example, we can move here. In starting, we can say this is, let's say, foundation. I'll just denote it by F because of space, right? Let's say foundation, and from foundation, let's say we can do this. We can do this, right? Let's say from foundation, we can actually, we can do, let's say, window level. We can lay bricks up to window level, right? And from window level, we can go to, let's say, to roofing. Let's say to roofing. Yeah, we can, let's say, go to roofing here. Let's say roofing. I would denote it by R. And from foundation, there's also another approach when building a house. We can move from foundation probably to roofing. And from roofing, we can actually move, let's say, from this to this, right? Like this. So we can actually present with arrows, right? Like this. right? And from roofing, here we can probably go back to window, lay bricks up to window level, and from here we can probably move to another level here, and here we can move to another level up until the end, right? End of the project, right? But on each activity we assign time. Let's say, for example, we are going to take 7 days here. We are going to take, let's say, 8 days here. We are going to take 7 days. Let's say here we are going to take 6 days. We take 4 days. Let's say we take 5 days here. We take, let's say, 6 days here. We take, yeah, something like this. Let's say, just as an illustration sake, we have something like this. So this becomes our network diagram. So it's a project management tool in the sense that we can actually see like the process of doing the project. Like we can actually see that we can do this project. Before doing this activity, we have to do this first, and up until it gives us alternative ways of doing a project. Like, for example, we can say we can move here to here to here, or we can move here from F to W up to R, something like that, right? So that's a project network diagram, right? So the next one now, it's actually an extension, what we call critical path analysis. Critical path analysis is now an extension of project network diagram, in the sense that I'll use this example that I've used. I'll just use this example. It's just an extension of project network diagram, in the sense that first we have to, let's say, we have to define what critical path analysis is, right? So because of space, and I don't want to wrap, I want to use everything that I wrote on whiteboard. So let me just type here. Let me just type here. Right. Let me just type here. Right. So critical path analysis is basically the shortest, right, distance or the shortest time to complete a project, right? Basically, we'll be looking at, you can say, by using, or rather, shortest time to complete a project, looking at the project network diagram, right? So it's basically the shortest distance to complete a project by looking at the project network diagram. So that's what we want to do now. We want to look at the project network diagram and determine which one is the shortest, which one is the longest, right? So, right. So we have, right. So we want to look at these ways of completing the project, right? Like basically their paths. So the first path, let me label this A. It's a red one. Let me label this A. This is B. This is C. This is probably D. This is E. Right, and the end. Right. So for us to finish the project, we can use the path A, right? We can use the path A, B, D, or E up to the end. So it's A, B, D, and E, right? But what's the total now in terms of these allocated days? What's the total? It's now 7 plus 7, 40 plus 6, which is 20, right? So it means if we follow the path A, B, D, E, we'll need 20 days, right? That's A, B, D, E, right? The next path, we can use A, B, C, E, right? So we have A, B, C, and E, right? And that path, if we sum 7 plus 8, that's 15, plus 5, that's 20. So we get 20 days, right? And another path, we have A, B, C, D, and E, right? So we have A, B, C, D, and E. So we sum the days following that path. We have 7 plus 7 plus 8, which is 15, right? Plus 4, right, which is 19, and plus 6, which is 25, right? 25 days, right? So we have come up with alternative paths to carry out the project. So now the critical path is now the shortest distance. So critical path, it's actually used to manage time as a constraint, right? Because we need to determine the shortest time that we can finish a project, right? So by looking at this path that we have determined, we have 20, 20, and 25. So the shortest, it means it's 20 days, right? So our critical path becomes 20 days, right? Anyone with a question on this one? Anyone? Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. That's perfect. That's perfect. Right. So that's it on project tools, project management tools. So you need to know these project management tools by, you just need to know them because a question may come in an exam. So let's say, for example, we can look at, let's say we can look at, you just need to come up with a question, a typical examination question, right? A possible typical examination question, rather. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Let's say in an assignment or exam, question may come like this. Discuss. Let's say discuss. Let's say discuss the tools that can be used to manage a project, right? The tools that can be used to manage a project, right? So you already know that those tools, we are basically looking at the project management tools. So As always, you start with your introduction, right? You start with your introduction, and in your introduction, you have to define project management tools. So I can just, because of space, I can say PMT as project management tools. You have to define it, right? And in defining, you have to indicate as well. You have to indicate the tools as well, or the tools that you are going to explain. Tools that you are going to explain in your board, right? And then after you have done this, you can basically say, so the essay below is going to discuss on the project, or on the project management tools, right? And then you'll be done with your introduction, right? And after doing your introduction, you go on, you proceed to body, right? Body of your essay. Body of your essay. So instead of writing body, you can just write project management tools, right? Instead of writing body. And then you explain each, you discuss each project, right? So whenever the question says discuss, it's either you first, let's say for example, it's work breakdown structure, right? Work breakdown structure, you need to explain here what it is, right? You explain what it is, and after explaining, you give advantages of it, right? And also you can give probably disadvantages of the work breakdown structure, right? So you can, for example, you can say work breakdown structure, it's actually a list of activities, or a structure where we list all the activities to be undertaken in a project, right? So you explain it, and you have to also, if it's not a context, a context question, you can actually contextualize yourself, like to say by using examples. Like you can say, for example, let's say building a house. In building a house, the activities that are there when building a house, let's say for example, laying foundation, laying bricks, roofing, those are the examples, right? So a work breakdown structure, it's actually a structure which lists all the activities and the time in which each activity is finished, or each activity is supposed to take, right? And after doing that, you go on to, to advantages. And as an advantage, you can say work breakdown structure. Since work breakdown structure, so on explaining advantages, the constraints, our project constraints are scope. We have said scope, time, right, and cost, right? So whenever you are explaining, that's actually a tip that I'm actually giving you. Whenever you come across a question like this, even in exam, whenever you're asked to explain the advantages of, let's say, for example, this work breakdown structure, focus your advantages on these three constraints. Like, for example, I said scope, time, and cost, right? Like, for example, you can say work breakdown structure, it helps us to manage the project so that we get expected deliverables. That's another example. That's actually another advantage, you see? So it means work breakdown structure as a project management tool, it actually helps us in conducting a work breakdown structure, the idea of it is to make sure at the end of the project we have the deliverable or the expected deliverables. So that's an example, right? And if it's time, you can say, since work breakdown structure, as we list the activities that should be done, we also allocate time on each activity, right? So it means work breakdown structure manages or actually ensures that the project is finished within the anticipated time or within the set time, right? Or you can say ensures that the project is conducted within the set time. Yeah, you can explain around that. And another example, another advantage, you can also write on cost, right? Project work breakdown structure, it helps the project manager to control costs and also to manage or plan costs, right? And also work breakdown structure, it helps to measure performance of a project, right? And then on disadvantages, you can just write one disadvantage. Let's say you can say project, let's say you can say work breakdown structure, it's actually a qualitative, or it focuses on qualitative factors rather than quantitative factors. If I'm saying it focuses on qualitative, it means it's like, as I explained earlier on, that work breakdown structure, you just list the activities and the time that you actually think you can finish each activity, right? But it doesn't give us, let's say, figures, like to work with figures, like to do the estimation, the part, and so forth and so forth and so forth, right? It doesn't do that. So it becomes a disadvantage, right? And then you'll be done with work breakdown structure. And then you go to another, but you still use these three to explain, like to write its advantages, right? You just write and write and write, and you address all the tools that we've actually covered, right? And then after that, you conclude. So on your conclusion, you can say, so conclusion, right? Conclusion, you can write, probably you can say, in conclusion, project management tools plays a pivotal role, or they are of great importance in success of a project. Why? Because these tools, they helps a project manager to plan time, to organize, to plan time, or to organize, or to manage, you can say, to manage the cost, to manage the time, and to manage the scope of the project, right? But you also need to mention that, however, when using these project management tools, right, the project manager should use them with extra caution. Why? Because they have their own disadvantages, right? And then you'll be done with your conclusion. And then you'll be also done with your essay, right? So any question on pertaining this kind of question? Any question? Is it clear? Is it clear? Yeah, if it's clear, you can just say it's clear. You can say it's clear. It's still fine. or you can write in the chat box that it's clear, right? So that's it on so we've looked on typical examination question or typical assignment question, right? Okay, if it's clear, that's perfect. All right, so we can move to another concept. All right, so I guess all right. Okay, right. So okay, so this is so basically this is the okay, we are now looking at problems faced in applying project management tools, right? So as I mentioned that, like as I was actually explaining how to answer that question on project management tools, right? Here's your disadvantages. You can write these problems because these are the problems that can be faced, right, in managing these or in managing in applying the project management tools or in managing the project, right? So the first problem is over budgeting and under budgeting, right? You can see that this, we are basically looking at cost. This is basically cost as a constraint, right? So that's why I said the moment you have that picture of those three, like cost, of those three constraints, which are cost, time, and scope, you'll be good to go, right? Because everything will just play around that, right? So I'm gonna use it with probably. So basically we are looking at cost here, right? Over budgeting and under budgeting. That's another problem. Like for example, let's say for example, we are applying work breakdown structure, right?
Sorry, Envoy,
Yes.
what time are we meant to finish the class?
We are left with probably a few minutes because this is the last thing that we're actually going to cover. And then we just explain the last part, will just explaining your assignment question. And that's all. I don't know if it's still okay.
Yes, that's fine. But I'm
That's okay.
just thinking maybe from next week, let's just do an hour. You know, Fridays are long days. It's been a long week. So after some time, we end up not hearing you.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll try to squeeze everything in an hour from next week onwards. Right. That's okay. So I'll just browse through these problems so that we finish in a couple of minutes. So that's basically over budgeting and under budgeting. There's also cost overruns, which imply actual costs. That's also another problem, and involvement of many projects and failing to complete them. That's also another problem. Extension of the scope. That's another problem, and also delays in one or more phases, which ends up affecting the project management tools, right? So that's the last thing that we are looking at. But now we will just, this is actually the question in your assignment, but it's a contextual question, right? So it's basically a contextual question, right? So that question, or the question in your assignment, is basically, it's actually saying that projects are characterized by typical constraints of scope, cost, and time, which are the three, or which are triple constraints, right? and scope is about to be done, what, and in other words, what, chichi. So the question now comes, discuss the constraints of the project and successes achieved, right? So to answer that question, the points that you need to focus on are the ones that we have explained earlier on: time, cost, and scope, right? So you start with your introduction, and in your introduction, you have to define project constraints. After defining project constraints, you indicate those constraints like cost, time, and scope. And then after that, you move to your body. Body of your essay, you define, or rather you explain how time affects that project, right? How time like affect as a constraint. How does it affect the project, and how cost affect the project, and how is the scope affecting the project? And after that, so as you will be answering using these points, you need to write the points, or you need to write them in the context of the case study given, right? So because of time, since probably we took long, I will write or the points that you should actually include in your assignment, and I'll make sure I'll write them like in summary, like what you are supposed to write in the context of the case study given. And then in our next lecture, I'll just share with you. That will be the first thing that we'll actually do. I'll share with you these points linking to the case study given, right? So any question before we close the lecture? Any question? If it's clear, you just write it's clear, or you can unmute yourself and say it's clear. Everyone?
It's clear,
Okay.
thanks, Envoy.
Okay. If it's clear, so definitely next week or next time when we meet, before starting on Unit 3, we'll basically look at this assignment question. Like I'll write like everything that you're supposed to write in the context of that case study, so that you see what you're expected to do when writing such kind of questions in the context of a case study, right? So if it's clear, I can say the lecture, we can end the lecture here. Have a good, have a wonderful weekend, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye. Bye.